All right, let's go ahead and go to the GOP side of this. It's very interesting. Some major results. We're going to start in the state of Arizona. So with impeachment. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. It's actually very interesting. So in terms of the 10 people in the House of Representatives who did vote to impeach Donald Trump, you can see that 2 of those people did actually, Herrera Butler is a little bit weird because it's a top 2 primary, but 2 out of the 10 have effectively survived to a point where they may get elected. But the rest of them, well, they basically fell to GOP voters and to a pretty intense campaign by President Trump, who said, look, I am going to target every single one of these people. There was one other that did survive. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen, who was Nancy Mace. But the rest of them are now in those top 2 primaries and face a pretty stiff re-election issue, especially Peter Meijer, who we've talked a lot here on the show about, because Peter Meijer was one of those people who his seat was already in a relatively Democratic district. It was a toss-up, lean toss-up rated by the Cook Political Report.
Yeah.
But after he went ahead and lost his primary, Krystal, what has happened is they've almost made it certainly a Democratic victory. And I think it's fascinating because on that one side, you are seeing, as we said, are there limited instances in which non-Trump-backed candidates prevail? Yes, that is absolutely true. Did Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp prevail in their primaries? Yes. Does that mean that Trump does not still have the vast majority of the power in the GOP primary at his disposal? No, it does not mean that at all.
Yeah.
As we are seeing, 8 out of 10 are gone ahead and lost.
Well, I do want to clarify on Herrera
Yeah.
Butler because it is a little confusing. The person who beat her in this top 2, what they call like a jungle primary, where it's everybody, it's Republicans, Democrats, everybody, was actually a Democrat.
Yes.
So in the fall, this is a Republican seat, very much expected that a Republican is going to hold it. So when you don't have all these other Republican challengers on the ballot, the expectation is very much that she will prevail, that Newhouse will prevail, and then there was one other one who voted for impeachment who also made it through their primary. So yeah, you probably have 3 out of the 10.
Right.
Still not a great record.
No.
Many of them retired. Few of them lost in their primaries. And you can see that there is still a huge price to pay for crossing Trump.
And I think that is the major point. And also, in terms of open primaries, the Trump power just cannot be overstated. Let's put this up there with Arizona, because this is just so stark, which is that in Michigan, in Arizona, pretty much Trump won across the board. So Blake Masters, he was in a very crowded primary. We should forget, he was running against well-established Arizona politicians. He used to work for Peter Thiel. He got the Trump endorsement, and he won resoundingly in that primary in the state of Arizona. Also, while yes, I know that there is some problem right now with the Kari Lake vote totals in Arizona, it does look like she's going to go ahead and pull that off. So we have Kari Lake. She's got 46% of the vote. Her top competitor, Corinne Robson, this is in the Republican primary there, has 44%. We're still waiting on a lot of votes coming out of Maricopa County. And so it could swing the other way. It's certainly possible, and we're going to get to how exactly she's talking about it. But, at the very least, she had a very, very strong showing. And same in the Secretary of State race. That is one which we had talked a lot here on the show, and why it mattered. And, well, why did it matter? The reason why is because this is the guy who said, A, he would not concede if he needed to, or he would concede if he lost because he would allege election misinformation or whatever. Also, on record saying that he believed that the 2020 election was stolen in the state of Arizona. He is going to be the Secretary of State candidate, Chris. This is going to be a person in charge, if he wins, administering elections. So it is a great test case at the state level of Arizona. Do Arizona voters buy into Stop the Steal enough to affirmatively elect and put somebody in place at the state level to run their elections who believes that the previous election was stolen? So this is like as close to a Stop the Steal referendum as it gets.
That's true.
With Blake Masters, it's a little bit up in the air. It's very complicated. I mean, Masters not that well known in Arizona. Obviously, he's got money behind him. Not being well known, though, isn't necessarily a bad thing. He doesn't have a voting record to defend. And Mark Kelly, though, is pretty popular in the state. He really keeps his mouth shut. So he's like a Biden supporter, but he spends a lot of time back there. As you said, he also has very sympathetic backstory. He was an astronaut, hero, all of that.
Husband of Gabby Giffords.
Husband of Gabby Giffords, which a lot of people still remember in the state of Arizona. So it's a confounding variable, and it certainly will be a tough race, but there is no question that him prevailing in that primary, it is almost certainly because of Donald Trump.
Well, let's talk specifically about Michigan, because this race between Meyer and Gibbs, Meyer again was the one who is a Republican incumbent who voted for Donald Trump to be impeached after the events of January 6th. And the expectation was that this race was not even going to be particularly close. That Gibbs, the pro-Trump, the Trump-endorsed candidate, the basically Stop the Steal candidate, that he would romp in this primary. This is also one where Democrats got very involved. I think it was $435,000 that Democrats poured into this race on behalf of the conspiracy theorist, the type of candidate that they claim is destroying democracy and the end of the world and it's existential. And then they wade into this race and prop this guy up. The end result, it ended up being quite close. So the last results I saw was 52-48 Gibbs. So if Democrats hadn't spent that money, there's a pretty good chance that Meyer might have pulled it off. So it's not just the power of Trump, it's also the Democrats decided that they wanted to go up against Gibbs, that they would rather take the risk of putting another nut job into Congress, but they think that they have a better chance of beating this guy in the fall, which is probably correct. They probably do have a better chance, but I wouldn't like 100% count on it.
Right.
But they poured tons of money into this primary against, I mean, it's just incredibly hypocritical against all of their stated values about what the stakes are of the election for democracy. Adam Kinzinger, of course, who is another Republican who has voted for Trump's impeachment, he is very upset about what Democrats did in this race and is, not being shy about it. Let's listen to what he had to say.
In the races, Peter Meyer lost his primary. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's if Peter's opponent wins and goes on to November and wins, that the Democrats own that. Congratulations. I mean, here's the thing. Don't keep coming to me asking where are all the good Republicans that defend democracy, and then take your donors' money and spend $500,000 promoting one of the worst election deniers that's out there. I mean, the DCCC needs to be ashamed of themselves. Thankfully, some members of Congress, Democrats, have spoken out and said they're disgusted. I respect it.
A little bit amusing because it's like, hey, Kissinger, they were never going to love you in the first place, which is, you could see from Carville and from Pelosi. I do want to say, though, I don't know if it's right to blame the Democrats' cash. At the end of the day, Republican voters just like Donald Trump, and they rejected Peter Meyer for trying to impeach him. So these people have agency. Like, it's not just millions of dollars that convince them to vote otherwise. Some people, that's all they care about. And to me, that's the more interesting data point, which is, yeah, sure, the Democrats are hypocrites. It's more about, them being hypocrites. Then at the end of the day, Republican voters care so much about Trump that if you cross him on any of these issues that they deem important, they'll go ahead and kick you out of office. Isn't that, frankly, the more interesting data point?
Yeah, for sure. But it is disgusting, the Democrats.
Oh, sure.
I
don't disagree. But,
I mean, listen, they're not wrong that they've got a better chance at this seat now. Not only do they not have, it's always harder to run against an incumbent. That's number one.
Right.
Number two, Gibbs is just, more, he's not as well known. He's further out on a limb in terms of where his views and his positions are. But if this ends up being a wave election, which it certainly could be, even with the Roe decision, then Democrats may have played a key role in getting this guy into office.
Yep.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.